Welcome to Learning Aloud, a podcast from the Organizational Dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania, produced to inspire purposeful leadership practice and transform organizational experience. I am your host, Stephen G. Hart. Jason Bisping is a consultant specialist in the area of organizational learning and development. Today, he works with organizations around the world to create highly engaging experiential learning events that truly drives behavior and cultural change. His current work with organizations is strongly influenced by his own background in theater, for which he holds a PhD, and the work of Augusto Boal, a Brazilian author, writer, playwright, and director. Boal is best known for inventing various forms of interactive theatrical methods designed specifically to transform the lives of an audience by having the spectators become the actors in their own story. Jason has stopped by our Zoom room today to chat with me about his current work in organizational learning and development, and he describes how Boal's influence is still very much in his mind as he creates learning solutions for his clients. Well, Jason, welcome to the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I'm happy to be here.
Well, your work as a senior consultant, learning and organizational development person, like a lot of my friends, including myself, actually, I see that you came from an unusual background into this work. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to how you got going into this learning and development space?
Yes, and I know that people come from their paths are winding just like mine. I mean, if I tell people I have a PhD in theater, their first question is always like, "How did you get where you are?" My degree is in theater, and my undergraduate degree, my master's degree, I focus mostly on traditional theater, traditional playwrights. My research when I got into my PhD, I focused on community-based theater and theater that you do with people in their homes or people in community centers or in rec centers or on the street. That theater that is more cooperative and collaborative and interactive. My research was in Guatemala, and I was trying to use theater, and I did successfully use theater to explore how do people cook and how do people use cook stoves in their homes, and what effect does that have on smoke inhalation, nutrition, and what if we sold them a stove, or if a nonprofit sold them a stove with a chimney, how would that improve their lives or mitigate the smoke in their homes and reduce, and improve their lives in any way? And so we were creating plays. We were creating plays in people's homes. We created a play for the community, exploring those ideas and how do you change people's minds and change people's behaviors, and seek out from them what are your behaviors. And so that was what my dissertation was about. And I use that work now with businesses every day. How do you go in and teach an interactive class to seek information from people? How are you being a better leader? How are you delivering great customer service? How are you coaching people? How are you making your place of business more inclusive to people of diverse backgrounds? And seeking that information and giving information at the same time, and seeing where can we change behaviors, where can we improve skills, how can we make people better at having crucial conversations. So that's how I've carried my research from Guatemala to, I don't know, New York and California and France, and I work with companies all over the world, creating interactive workshops. So that's what I mostly do. Um, on a daily basis, mostly what I do is write Word documents that turn into PDFs, but they turn into workshops, and people take them out into the world and deliver them to people, mostly virtually these days.
Yeah, but I love the fact that it's very experiential, isn't it? And
It
it's a
is.
thread of storytelling. So there's the hence of the sort of the theatrical aspect of it. So how has it been working in organizations to your experience at this point? How do they react when you do that? Just it's not a typical training class, is it? This is much
It's
more.
not, and that word experiential confuses a lot of people, or they just gloss over it. And I appreciate your use of it because it is about the experience, and so that's what we often have to sell. That not just to the executives that we sell our products to, but to the people in the class at the beginning, there has to be a disclaimer, even virtually.
Mm.
Today, you're going to be on your feet. Today, you're going to be challenged. Today, we're going to ask you to be your best self. Today, this isn't like your typical class, because a lot of classes are just think right time and reflect time, which, that may or may not be effective. These classes, we know are effective. The research shows if you're up and you're an adult and you're standing, and or even not standing, if you're doing something, if you're practicing something, if you're practicing that crucial conversation, you're experiencing it and you get better at it, and you're much more willing to go out and do something about it and change that behavior and build that skill. So that's our approach.
Yeah. I would imagine it takes a fair amount of trust, and people have to take risks to engage in this form of learning and development. Is that what you've seen?
We get that every once in a while. My pat response to that is, it's is it a risk in this safe classroom to stand up and try something, or is it more of a risk not to do something when you get back to work? Right. I worked with a group of nurses once, and they were nursing students, and they were pretty green and scared, and they did not want to get up in front of the class because we were practicing end of life discussions,
Mm.
which happen all the time. And, after a while, you get better at them, but it's never easy to go to a family and say, your loved one is going to die today or tomorrow, or the surgery didn't go well and they did die. Um, those are tough. They're the toughest conversations in the world, right? So they were hesitant to get up in front of the class and practice those, because we were practicing. We had a list of peer reviewed characteristics that made end of life discussions go well, and we gave them to them. We say, here's your list of things, and I don't know what they are, but here's your list of things that make end of life discussions go well. And they said, oh, we'll just do it on the day. And that's what everybody says. We're like, oh, we'll do it when I'll just wait till someone dies and then I'll have that discussion. Um, and I said, wouldn't you rather practice it now so that you're even a fraction of better at it, so that when you have to have that conversation, which some of them had jobs and they had already started them, and some of them were starting their jobs next week, and some of them were very likely going to be a part of these discussions in the next week or two. And so I said, wouldn't you rather practice it now here with us, with all your friends, safe, where you're supported, before you have to do it then? So it's usually an easy sell. That is the most extreme example I can think of where it was a no-brainer. You have to practice it before you actually go out and do it. But for many managers in a business setting, it is a harder sell. But I usually tell that story or something similar.
I know that some of the influences, the way you work doing these things, comes from your doctoral thesis, and also what you know about a gentleman named Augusto Boal. Can you talk to us a little bit about the influence that he had, and how your work incorporates some of the things that he taught?
Well, I don't want to pretend that I actually knew him, but I did meet him once at a conference in the bathroom. We were standing next to each other in the sink, at sinks next to each other, and we shared a moment in the mirror. And he didn't know who I was. I definitely knew who he was, and he knew that. But he's a huge influence on me, and a lot of my colleagues in the theater world worked with him and worked with his son. I never had the opportunity to work with him, but my work is heavily based on his theories and his practice, which is a lot of what I've talked about, which is to change behaviors, is to practice what you're going to do when you get out in the world. And that's how he used theater to, um, I mean, he was a revolutionary. He was trying to change the government in Brazil. He ran for office. He got heavily involved in protesting legislation. I mean, a lot of his theater was about improving people's lives and making the government there more democratic. And it I mean, that relates to the work that I do now and the research that I did, like in Guatemala. Um, we're trying to change the status quo and get people to rethink what they're thinking. To do that, you need to get it into your body,
Mm.
right? So, for example, this week I was working with a group of managers, and we're working on diversity and inclusion training. And there's just one skill we're trying to teach them: how to tell an inclusive story. The research shows that if you have a group of team members, and every week in a meeting you tell a positive story about someone in that team, they're going to like that. People people like when they have stories told about them that are positive. So many managers squander that opportunity to, hey, I'm going to take a moment and tell a positive story about Steve. I had a great brunch with Steve the other day. We had a great discussion, and here are the great ideas that Steve shared with me. Just sharing something like that puts a glow up on Steve. He's happy, right? Steve's already smiling, right? Um the rest of the team sees that appreciation, and it just creates a really strong bond of inclusion and belonging. All the research shows that, right? I think the guy's name is Zach, Z-A-K, that did a lot of that storytelling research and how powerful it can be. I mean, but humans have been telling stories around fireplaces and
Mhm.
cave since the cavemen. It's something very human about us. So we know that research. So back to Boal, I'm in this group of this workshop with this group of managers, and the way I design the class is they're going to stand up and they're going to tell a story. They're going to practice it. We're going to coach them and say, how could you make it more positive? They're going to get feedback from their peers in the class. Maybe include a detail about this, leave this part out. Why do you feel like you have to put a gentle jab in there? Like, oh, I was just joking around. Leave that part out. Don't gently jab or joke at this time. Give them a positive story. And so standing up and actually doing that and getting that feedback and putting it into our bodies, they're much more likely to do it well and to just do it when they get back to work. And we built that into the class. You're like, okay, when are you going to tell this story? Because we made them write a story specifically about someone on their team that they could tell in the next week.
Yeah.
So those are the ways that I take Boal, and that how do we put it into our bodies and then take it to people that are going to actually do something with it that will make a really positive difference in that
Yeah.
workplace.
I know that one of your key passions is diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've talked about that, and I can't imagine a more important thing in our organizations today than to get this. So, what are some of the other things that you've done using this technique around things like social justice and that kind of thing, and addressing racism in workplaces? How do you those more sensitive things? How can you use this idea to expand uh, our understanding of these issues?
Well, I started doing that kind of work in an actual with a group at the University of Colorado called the Interactive Theater Project, and they they were a Boal group. I mean, Trent and Rebecca, who I worked with there, absolutely amazing humans. They run a theater company now, as well, that does similar work, and they studied with Boal and his son, and we would do that kind of work on campus. And that was in the 2000s, early 2000s, and I think we stopped doing that in like 2014, 2015. But for like 10 years there, that was a heavy thing on campus from like '04 to 2014. And that's a lot of campus and college work, right? Taking and we were talking about sexual assault and racism, and we're way ahead of our time. Companies now are just starting to do that kind of work. So to answer your question is, like, I've had this passion. I've been working on this for a long time. I feel like I took like a few years off, and we were trying to sell it to companies, and we were trying to get companies um, to deliver this kind of training. We had a training called Leveraging Inclusion that I wrote for several years, and it just wasn't getting delivered that much. Even the companies that bought it from us, it was getting delivered a couple times a year. Well, then sometime last year, one company came to us and said, "We need a refresher on this. We need it we need it updated." And so I gave it a new update. And one of the one of the more impactful exercises in there, besides that storytelling exercise, is just like, I think I have 6 practical tips in there that I found from research. And this is one that just impacts a lot of managers and makes them come to, well, I call them aha moments, where they just like, oh, I get that. That makes sense. I'm going to start doing that. And it's called megaphoning.
Mm.
And I'd heard about it first through research and through, I think it was a New York Times article about President Obama's staff. And this is back in like 2012, I think, because they noticed that women in meetings, in their Oval Office meetings, were saying things, and then people would go, and then the meeting would move on. And then a man would say the same thing. Everyone would round of applause. Oh, that's a great idea. And they would run it up. And the women and some of the men were looking around at each other like, she just said that 5 minutes ago. And many people can relate. And when we talk about that in class, like a lot of people are nodding heads. And the people who aren't nodding their heads are looking around like, maybe I'm the person who's been doing that, talking over people, stealing their ideas. So a lot of realizations there. So megaphoning, what the Obama administration started doing, um, was when that happened, they would stop the meeting and say, "Well, I just want to recognize real quick what she just said," and repeat it and amplify it so that it doesn't get lost before we move on. We can move on and not remember it, and it might not be important, but I just want to make sure it doesn't get glossed over. That way it gets the weight that it's due. Because there is a bias there for whatever reason to acknowledge it, and people recognize it and bring it up later and know it's important, but they just don't give it the weight. And most companies don't want to dig into that part. They don't want to dig into what is our unconscious bias. Why are we sexist, and biased against women in some ways? There's a lot of things going on there that companies just don't have the courage or the will or the ability to jump into. So a tip like that, like, hey, if something like that happens, amplify it, megaphone them, support them. They can do that.
Yeah, it's almost like taking one conversation at a time, isn't it? And having a purposeful pause around a meaningful comment that was made, and then amplifying it so that everybody gets to recognize that it was taken done in the context of the meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And talk about biases. Companies and managers have a bias towards practical solutions like that.
yeah,
They just don't have the ability and the concept, or the ability and the bandwidth, I guess, to say, hey, there's these theories about sexism, and then to translate them into what am I going to do about that at work. My job largely is to say, here are some practical things you can do at work that will make people's lives better. um and it's based in the science over here. You don't need to worry. They don't care about that as long as I cite it. But if it is based in something true and it does make a difference, they love, like, I don't know how many times companies like, can we add a tips sheet to this? Can
mm,
we add a best practices list? um those are those Word documents I was talking about earlier with you. That's what I mostly do, is write Word documents of tip sheets.
yeah. Are you working on also on an individual level with leaders in some of these companies? So you do a lot of group training, but are you working on an individual level with some people?
Most of my work is creating interactive workshops. I do a lot of, with our clients, I do a lot of consulting about, um, here's how you can be a more effective leader, learning and development leader. And a lot of, uh, lately, how can you make your trainers more effective? Because we send our trainers in, we have master trainers that go in, and then some companies have their own trainers. So I work with those individual trainers, and our trainers work with those individual trainers. And a lot of my consulting, clients come to me, a director of learning and development at a company will come to me and say, how can we make our trainers better? And how can we make our leaders better? So I do a lot of mid-level management interactive workshops, and that kind of gets pushed out to thousands of people at a company. And then we'll send coaches in, or I'll talk to, um, the VP of a group, like the VP of sales. It's like, I've got all these. We had one last year. They had a scandal where there was a pregnancy and um, uh, at a conference, and some heavy drinking, and they're like, oh, we're going to get sued, and we're going to, we can't have this culture of, the sales bro, heavy drinking, sex and all this stuff happening at our conferences on our company dime. We want to shift our culture. So part of that is me talking to the VP and saying, what can you do to shift this culture? And then what do we want to put in this class that gets people up on their feet and practicing not doing those things? and stop scheduling conferences in Miami for 4 days at a hotel where there's only 3 days of programming each day.
Hmm.
If you don't want that culture, don't do that. I mean, simple things like that.
I know that you've done some work with, I've had Jason Richmond on the podcast before, and Jason's also spoken at one of our Penn brunches. And I know that you've done some work with him around culture change. What are some of your critical approaches to establishing a culture change, a sustainable culture change in an organization? What truly does it take?
Yeah, Jason and I worked a lot together. I mean, I work for him and with him, and I think for organizations, the key to culture change is top down and bottom up, right? I mean, going back to my work, Boal was all about bottom up, but then he eventually did run for office, right? He recognized that he got to a point where him running for office made a difference. You need, like, that example I was just giving about the VP. That was a culture change.
Mhm.
That wasn't just a training about diversity and inclusion and respect. I think we called it ethical leadership, and it was a 6-hour program. But that was also about a culture change on that in that department, and that can't happen unless everyone from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top is changing their behaviors. So the key is total buy-in from the organization, alignment on what it is. So we encourage and we help um, organizations write values or clarify their values and then to live by them. So we line our training with that. We have, hanging posters, that, putting out initiatives of here are our values or here are our new values and this is what we're living by, and then being aligned with them. I mean, that's a start to it. So we have assessment tools on are you aligned. We have exercise where we walk executives through creating and refining their values. And I mean, there's a lot to it. If you're going to change a culture, first you got to take a lot of the toxic stuff out, or build on the positive things of your culture, um, and just leverage everything you can. I talk a lot about leveraging those strengths and leveraging away those weaknesses. Um, and it's slow. It happens bit by bit. There can be huge leaps and there can be huge initiatives, but it has to happen a little bit by a little bit by a little bit. But you can see a change immediately, and you can see a lot of change over a short period of time.
Yeah, I maybe have too much of an optimistic outlook on life, but I feel I've seen a bit of a change in the demographics of the workforce lately, and I had a privilege of working with some emerging leaders a couple of years ago, and I really got excited at how naturally they seem to fall into the line with the kind of thinking you just espoused. They seem to automatically to have a real way of working inclusively, a way of inquiring, of sort of feeling of wanting to belong to an organization. It seemed that they had so much more hardwired capability than people of my own generation did to sort of act in an inclusive way in an organization, perhaps create a more sustainable culture. What's your take on that? Is that too optimistic on my part, or is that some truth to it?
No, I think that we've become in many ways, we've become a more inclusive society, and people in a younger generation grew up knowing only that. I mean, there are exceptions, and there's regional exceptions, and there's cultural exceptions. But I, I mean, I have kids. I have younger brothers and sisters. Even them, the world they grew up in with the internet, and it's a more global and more diverse world than it ever has been. I mean, when I was young, when there was no internet, I'm not that old. I Right when the internet was just taking off, when I was in the Navy, I had the opportunity to go to Japan, Australia, Tokyo, Bahrain, and that was a huge experience for me. Being in Tokyo and seeing 20 million people and that I'd never seen before and had never seen me, and seeing just all that culture and all those buildings was a refreshing experience. I think that, and a mind blowing experience. the people, any people younger than me connected to the internet, or the opportunities that they've had to see global films and translated works from other languages. They just have a wider range of experience when they were much younger. And so I think that leads to a more understanding and inclusive mindset in general. I think some of those biases go away and some of those
Mhm.
generalizations go away if you know, if you're a more global citizen, and it's just easier to be a more global citizen now.
Yeah. So I'm curious, from a practical perspective, we're recording this and still in the pandemic here, and I know that a lot of your work is very much uh, on site with people. But how have you been able to translate the work into the more remote-like environments, and what adjustments have you had to make to your methods and teaching?
A lot. I mean, beforehand, before the pandemic, we did almost all of our work with businesses live, just because of the nature of our work. We're kind of a boutique company, but we work with very large companies, Fortune 500 companies. But there's only like 10 of us, and then we contract people out when we need extra help. So we do very focused work. We were working with people in person because that's the service we provide and that's what they were paying for and they liked it. And it's not that expensive to fly to California or New York, do client meetings, do train the trainers. Since the pandemic, we've done everything online. I had a lot of experience from when I was at the university and just creating videos and things with virtual training. I'd been doing virtual training since '07. And when companies started asking for it, we just started providing it. So we have been doing, Zoom, WebEx, Adobe Connect. For the last year, we just ramped that up. Teams, Google Meet, whatever a company wants to use, we'll adapt our training to it. Mostly, we've been using WebEx and Zoom now, and I already knew those platforms pretty well. And I mean, in the last year, I've become an expert on them. Now we do trainings on how to train on WebEx, how to train on Zoom. We had to adapt. We had to hold all of our client meetings. We The last 3 days I've been in a train the trainer, training trainers on how to deliver training. That normally would have been in person, 3 day. They provided lunch and snacks. Those are the best, right?
Yes.
Per diem, staying in a hotel. But now we do it all online, and it's a little bit different. And there is an adjustment there, but I mean, I'm doing it from home. um, and is it as effective? I don't know. We'll see when they go out and have to deliver the training. But we've had some huge successes in train the trainers in sales and train the trainer in customer service, because companies still need to have new sales trainers come in, and they're hiring new people for customer service. So those people need to be trained up, and they have been, and they're on the job, and they're selling things, and they're serving customers. So it's been going well.
So, from a techniques perspective, can you point to some things that you've learned to do very effectively in the online environment that have worked well for you? Specific tools, techniques that you're using?
Yeah, we use absolutely every single one of the engagement tools on WebEx, the raise hand, the green check, the red X. And the thing that I tell my trainers and the trainers that we train is that you want to be activating participants on a regular basis. And by that I mean, do the robot check. Are you there? Are you alive? Do you have a heartbeat? Give me a green check. Answer this very simple question, which is something that we do. Our trainers at live are masterful at this kind of thing. When you're in the classroom and you've got a circle of desks around you, they just will naturally take a small step forward, and everyone's eyes come up towards them when they take that step forward. And they can draw that kind of attention in a live setting. And so I use that as an example with my trainers, and I say, you need to be doing that and finding ways to naturally do that in a virtual setting. So the example I give sometimes is, as we move into this next section, everyone take a look at the screen. Place your arrow on the screen where you see something that you want to work on. So that just gets everybody engaged in looking at the screen, soaking in the content, and interacting with it in a way that's simple and engaging. And a trainer should be doing that several times every 10 minutes. Just keeping that ebb and flow of attention and keeping people's eyeballs on you, which is so easy to do for charismatic people in a live setting. We're just retraining ourselves to be charismatic virtually. And some trainers struggle with it and need a lot of practice, and just holding a mouse makes them lose all their charisma. Um, and some people are very good at it, better at it virtually than they are live. They're like, I love hiding behind a screen. I'm like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. I can be very charismatic and godlike when the curtain is up, but then I turn into a very weird person when the curtain comes down. So yeah, there's a lot of things we do to try and match that live charisma.
Mm. Have you found that, as I do sometimes, being both the teacher and then manipulating all the things on the screen is sometimes a bit schizophrenic to do all those things, and maybe draws your attention away. So have you modeled the idea where maybe people are supporting each other, your trainers are working in tandem, and one person's taking care of the content area while the other one's doing the production work, as it were?
We use a producer. We do use a producer, and just to be doing the setting up the breakout rooms, setting up teams, setting up the slides, advancing slides, doing a lot of those clicking of buttons. And some trainers are. I work with a trainer who's absolutely brilliant, and she just doesn't ever touches the computer. She just stands in front of the camera and delivers a masterful class, and she might say, "Next slide," and just is engaging the people the whole time and having them point at the screen and having them use things, but the producer's clicking everything. And I work with another trainer who barely uses their producer and is there for a backup when she can't quite click everything she wants to click, and she's there clicking with them and working with them and match my on-screen energy. And so I've seen facilitators match their, or kind of as they're trying to find their charisma in the online space, they're leveraging that producer. And so I think providing that producer for us is important for them to be. And that's, we just hired two producers to do some contract work for us. And when I was hiring them, one of the things I wanted to hear them say is, I'm here to serve whatever the producer or whatever the facilitator needs. And that's what both of the people that we ended up hiring were brilliant, and they've been doing a lot of this work the last year and over the last couple years, and that's what we're looking for in a producer. Because a facilitator is trying to adapt a lot of different things for a lot of different activities, um, to make it not like live training, but to match the charisma and the engagement of live training. So yeah, for the type of work we do, you almost need a producer. Maybe in 5 years, when some of these facilitators just get really good, or the technology just gets more advanced, where I don't know, we get foot pedals or something so that you can advance slide just foot pedals. I don't know. There are not enough hands to do what we
Yeah, I
need.
like that idea of foot pedals. Yeah. So I think, I just brought this up because I think an area of opportunity for people who, like I did, grew up in the classroom training environment, business training environment. This is going to be a skill we need to master now. I think, we may get back to some form of normal, but I think a version of this will always continue now. And
Oh, yeah.
and people have bought into it. They see the results, and organizations like yours are doing great things that create great results for people. So, what would you advise somebody who's a formerly stand-up trainer? How would they get into the world of remote learning and teaching?
How would they get into the world of it?
How might you, teach them or give them advice on what they could do to master this skill?
Similar to what I tell companies when they're trying to change their culture. I mean, leverage your strengths, right? If you are someone who is extremely charismatic and people can't take their eyes off of you, uh, be on camera a lot. Use that camera, draw the eye to you. Put the things on. WebEx just, or Zoom just had a feature now where you can green screen your face in front of your PowerPoint, right? So use the PowerPoint, but have your face up there, and I point at things. I mean, I've seen people do that. All right, see where I'm pointing on the screen here? Leverage your strengths. If you're someone who is a little bit more cerebral and wants to walk people through things in a visual way, leverage your PowerPoints and lay your PowerPoints or your visuals and whatever other materials you have, workbook activities, lay them out in a way that makes sense to you and walk the participants through it and guide them on that learning journey with those visuals. Um, the big thing that's missing, that live training, when you're there live, it's it's the visual is given. We're in a real room together, and there's a lot of things to look at, right? You could sit in a classroom, and I'm picturing a classroom with tables all around, and I'm a participant, and the facilitator might not be particularly charismatic or engaging, but I have another participant next to me. I can look over at their book and what they're writing. I can look at other participants and see what project they're working on. I can see the things on the screen that are being shared. There's so much more information to be gathered there. And so that's what you're trying to recreate. That learning environment you're trying to recreate is online, is always going to struggle with that. I mean, there's the richness to that room, that training room, if you've done it right, that is hard to match. So you have to try and match that. Do breakout rooms. Use every bit of technology. Use those green checks and red X's. Keep people engaged in a way, even if they're not engaged with you, even a medium learner is going to be looking around and trying to pick things up and trying to get better. But if it's a void, if it's you and your boring slides and they have nothing else to look at, they're going to look at the internet.
Yeah.
Right? They're gonna answer their emails. And it's hard enough to keep people engaged off their emails in a real classroom. If you're giving them so much less input than a real classroom, you just got to step that up. More visuals, more engagement, try and match the richness of that live classroom. And that's a skill. So for anyone moving from live from live to virtual right now, uh, that's what you're missing. Don't you, if you, whatever you were great at before, bring that in.
Mm,
Don't let it drop away.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's terrific advice. I appreciate that. I especially like the idea of the green screening of the face over the PowerPoint. I think that's the one I'm going to use myself.
That's
So,
a good one. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, I do. I'm going to check that one out. So, one of the things we do in this round of our Learning Aloud podcast series is ask our guests some questions to close out the interview and sort of get a peek behind who you are just a little bit. So, I have some questions I'm going to ask you, and I just respond as you feel the spirit moves you, if you were. So, my first question is, what is one thing you would most like to do in your life that you have not yet done?
Uh, Very easy. Go to Italy and eat meats and cheeses and drink wine.
Oh,
Since the pandemic started, that is all I've thought about.
you taking your family with you on that one?
Well, maybe just my wife.
Well, Italy's a beautiful place. I'm sure you'd love it. In
Mhm.
your opinion, what is one thing the world needs right now to make it a better place to live?
Oh, that's a tough one. The first thing that popped into my head was education. Just a more educated populace that has critical thinking skills, that has even educated in being kind to each other and understanding each other. Um, it makes it a better place. The less we know, it seems the more divided we are, and the more incorrect assumptions we make.
Interesting. So, if you were back in school today thinking about starting a career, what would you want to be when you grew up?
Uh, for someone who graduated 22nd grade like I did, I think about this a lot. When you go into a very narrow focus like a PhD in theater, um, I I've never come to a conclusion. I've thought about, would I go back and get my MBA? Would I go back and get a different art degree? Would I become a novelist, or would I not get a degree altogether? Most of the time, I think I would have gone into um, something like architecture or writing. I mean, I have a writing degree and I do write, but um, those are the things I fantasize about in my little cabin that I don't have. what would I do in my wood-fired cabin?
Yeah. So, what hobby or activity outside of your work brings you joy?
Fly fishing. I live in Colorado. I love to go fly fishing. I love the quiet of it, the solitude of it. I usually go with my friend and, we'll talk every couple hours and talk on the drive up and down, but otherwise we're just
Island.
it's yeah, silent.
Yeah, beautiful. And the last question is, what person, living or dead, has inspired you the most?
Ooh.
Outside of Augusto, of course.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I probably would have said that if we didn't. Um, I had a professor, and his name was Jim Simons, and I try and channel him as much as I can. He's retired now from the University of Colorado, but a brilliant man, and his calm. He's just so calm and sure, and his resolve, and he had this ability that I admire in him, and similar to my uncles, they have it. And I feel I'm always trying to get it to tell any joke at any time, and even if it's like making fun of people a little bit or it's a slight jab, everyone's reaction is, "Oh man, oh, you're just joking." But other people try that joke and like, "How dare you say that?" He just has a charisma about him that I really admire. And the work that he did and the theater that he created and the students that he produced were he has a high rigor for and a high standard for what scholarship is and what a great piece of theater is and how to engage an audience. There's so many things about Jim Simons that I admire and that I try try and emulate. Anyone going to graduate school with me would be like, "Yeah, right. You're no Jim Simons," and that's why I admire him so much. I really do.
Well, that's great. Well, I want to thank you for stopping by our Zoom room today and sharing with us some of your insights into your life and to your work and the contributions that you've made. I appreciate it very much and look forward to continuing conversations down the road.
Absolutely, and thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. My guest today was Jason Bisping, consultant specialist in organizational learning and development. This has been a Learning Aloud podcast produced by the Organizational Dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania. My thanks to Dan Shields for producing today's show. My name is Steve Hart.